Hi, this is Anil and welcome to the video tutorial for the Learning Lad on C++ programming. So in this tutorial we're going to learn about how to overload the constructors in C++. So all of you know that what is function overloading. Function overloading is nothing but writing the function with the same name but with different types or different number of parameters. Since these constructors are also functions or the methods of a class, we can overload them. So we can overload them just like the way we were overloading the functions. So here in this tutorial, just for the demonstration purpose, I have defined a class human and we have age and name as a private properties of this class, and we're gonna write the constructors and overload them and make them to take different parameters. The first constructor we're gonna write is the default constructor, that is the constructor with no parameters, and all of you know that constructors should have the same name as the class and no return type. So here inside this default constructor we're gonna say default constructor, and then we're gonna initialize these two properties. So let's initialize this age to a value of 0 and name to no name. Alright, the next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna overload the constructors now. So I'm gonna write a constructor which is gonna take the name as a parameter. So to do that I need to write the function name, which is the constructor name here, human, since it is constructor, no return values, and then this constructor is gonna take one parameter, so it's gonna be string, and I'm gonna say input name, that's gonna be I name, and then it's gonna take one parameter. And here what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy these statements from the previous constructor definition and I'm gonna paste it here, and we're gonna say constructor with name as a parameter, and then we're gonna initialize this age to 0 and we're gonna initialize this name to whatever the value passed, that is I name, the variable name. And again we're gonna write another constructor, same name, human. I'm gonna paste it, and here we're gonna make this to take the age as a parameter, so it's gonna be int, and I'm gonna call it as input age or I age. And here also I'm gonna say age as a parameter, and the age is gonna be I age, and name is gonna be no name. Alright, the next or the last method that we're gonna build is we're gonna build a method to print out the values. So it's gonna be void display, and it's not gonna take any parameters, and here we're gonna say cout, it's gonna be name and this line and age. Alright, now we have defined a class human with two parameters or the properties age and name, and we have overloaded the constructors. So we have a default constructor which is not going to take any parameters and it's going to initialize all that properties, and then we have a constructor which is going to take a string value as a parameter, and we have another constructor which is going to take the age value as a parameter. And similarly, if you want, you guys can write another constructor which is going to take the name and the age. So you guys can do that. So I'm going to copy this and paste it in the next line after that, and we're going to name first, so it's going to be string I name and age. So it's going to be name equal to I name, and I'm going to change this one to age and name as a parameter. Alright, the next thing is creating the object when we overload the constructors. So here you guys may remember, while creating the objects we were writing the class name first, human, and then object name, let's say Anil, and if you are following this first method, and then we were not writing anything, so we were leaving it as it is. And here what happens is when we create an object, the C++ is going to call the default constructor, so this human will be called, and this age and name will be initialized to a value which we have specified here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call anil.display. Okay, the next thing is we have defined or overloaded the constructor to take parameters here. So what we can do is we can pass the parameters to this object while creating it. So here what we're gonna do is we're gonna create another object, let's say Andy, and we're gonna initialize this object when we create it. To do that, we need to use the two parentheses and we need to pass the parameters. So here we have the options like we can pass a string value, or we can pass an integer value, or we can pass a string and an integer value. So just for the demonstration purpose, I'm gonna pass this string value. So here the name is gonna be Andy, and I'm gonna save this. I'm gonna build and run this. Okay, we have, all right, this should be small s, that's because string, since C++ is case sensitive. I'm gonna build and run again. All right, now you guys can see when this first object is created, Anil object is created, our default constructor is called, and the no name and 0 is set to properties of that object Anil, and that's why when we display that we get no name and 0. And then when we create this Andy, we got this constructor with name as a parameters, and if we display the parameters or the values of the properties using the display function, we'll get the Andy. So I'm gonna build and run this. You guys can see Andy and 0. That's because when we pass a name as a parameter, we made that 8 to 0 and the name to whatever the value passed. And similarly we can create another object and pass the age while creating that. Let's say Alex, and we're gonna pass the age, let's say 25. And now if I build and run this, we get constructor with age as a parameter, Andy 0. And similarly we can pass a name also, let's say Alex here, and we'll get constructor with age and name as a parameter. So what we are done in this tutorial is we have overloaded the constructor, and that's why we have the options of initializing the objects while creating it. And the next thing is, what if we don't define this default constructor here, and we overload the constructor to take the parameters? At that time you guys need to pass the parameters while creating the object. So we can't create a variable without any parameters like this, and that's because when we write at least one constructor with any parameters, at that time the C++ is not gonna add the default constructor. So if you want to create the objects with no parameters, then you guys need to specify the default constructor, otherwise it won't be added. And if I run this program right now, we'll get error. Just to demonstrate that, I'm gonna build and run, and you guys can see, and I'm gonna open up the logs, and here it says no matching function call for human. That's because the default constructor is not declared or defined. And if we haven't declared any of these constructors, then the default constructor will be automatically added. So this is it. This is how you guys can overload the constructors in C++. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.